So thank you all for taking the time to join us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin Spietza, and I'm the director of the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning and also a professor in the Department of Chemistry. Joining me today, we have Gretel Stock, the Dean of University College, and also Troy Seppelt, Dean of Students. Due to a scheduling conflict, Todd Husbany was originally going to join us, but unfortunately he needs to be up in Wausau today. So Gretel graciously agreed to step in. So we're just going to start off. I'm going to provide just a few sort of opening remarks about the context for this meeting and sort of our hopes for it. And then we'll turn it over to Troy and Gretel and all of you. So our hope is that this is sort of an opening in a series of conversations about how to better support faculty and instructors as they work to support our students. We've heard a lot from faculty about sort of in this post-pandemic world, we're seeing students come to us with a wider variety of challenges in terms of mental health and sort of how to college skills. And so while we know it's late in the academic year, we also know that at this point in the semester and at this point of the year, stress is ramping up for everyone, faculty and students alike. And so we're hoping to be able to provide some support for all of you with sort of emergent challenges that you're facing right now, or provide guidance or resources to help you address sort of patterns of behavior that you're seeing in your current students, and also to learn more about how we can support you in planning professional development for next academic year. So with that being said, just a couple of comments related to context. So again, we know that over the last few years, we've seen students come to us with sort of a wider variety of stressors in their life, and with a different capacity to manage those stressors than maybe what we've seen in years past. And so I've heard a lot from faculty I've talked to about how it appears that things are escalating much more quickly for our students. So they're kind of going from, hey, I'm okay, I'm doing all right, to, oh my goodness, I'm in crisis, I don't know what to do, much faster than what they did sort of pre-pandemic. They also seem to have lost some of their ability to handle low-level or mid-level stressors. So the things that in years past wouldn't have been significant issues for our students, we're finding that they don't have the same coping skills to be able to deal with those. And so that's a challenge, right? Because you run into a lot of those low and moderate level stressors, especially at this point in the semester. We're also finding students are struggling to sort of manage change, and they've lost an ability to sort of what we were referring to as fail successfully, right? So when they're hitting these, what to us we know to be normal stumbling blocks, normal setbacks, they're really struggling to figure out how to move forward from those. And in researching on the pandemic, when you look at sort of expert studies, right, what we're finding, a lot of people are predicting is that this is not a problem that's going to go away in a year or two. This is something that's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. A lot of estimates are saying, you know, the next 8 to 10 years, we're going to be dealing with these kinds of impacts from the pandemic. And so as we think about next year, we think about welcoming new freshmen who, again, are coming to us from a high school environment where oftentimes it is still in that sort of total flexibility mode that we were all in during the pandemic, right? Their expectations for what college is like and what it takes to be successful in college are much different. And because of the challenges our current students have faced, right, they don't have that same peer support network to help them make that transition successfully. And so we're seeing a lot more of that work being shifted to
and then
faculty.
again.
I can.
There's a single phone that we use for department chair, and Mick is no longer department chair, so yeah, so you have to call his cell phone.
I'm going to go ahead and mute Ken. I'm going to assume he was not talking to us. So again, just to sort of summarize, again, a lot of what we're seeing are sort of these executive functioning legs in students because, again, of that, the changes that we've seen to K-12 education, the lack of peers to help provide the scaffolding students need to make the transition. And so again, we want to start a conversation about what patterns of behavior are we seeing with students, how can we support faculty as they help to support students, making sure that faculty are aware of resources that exist on campus, that again, you don't have to do everything for the student, right? It is okay to hand students off to resources that exist, making sure faculty and instructors know what those resources are to feel successful in that. And we also realize that for many of you, this may be preaching to the choir. You're here because you care deeply about students, and so you may know some of these things. But we feel it's important to make sure that we're providing this opportunity. But most of all, really what we want to hear is from all of you. So I'm going to open it up in just a second. Before I do, Troy and Gretel, anything that I missed or anything that you would like to add?
I think the one thing that I would add that's important for all of our colleagues to remember is we're almost at a reset point where things we might have assumed students knew before. It's really a great idea to be intentional about transparency in your teaching and expectations and learning, and not just once, but multiple times to say, this is my expectation. This is what we're doing today, and this is why this is important. Here is the deadlines, and these deadlines are real. I have a policy that means that we have limited flexibility, or this is the kind of work I expect you to engage in. Being very transparent with folks, students, about those kinds of teaching items, as well as the expectations for them as a college student, I think is important, because we don't have that peer scaffold. And I think the world has shifted a little bit. So being kind but transparent, I think, is really an important discipline for us to be student ready.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Troy, he, him, and his, your Dean of Students. My 2.5 cents, or maybe nickels worth as we start, is that we all know that humans managing their mental wellness and mental health is not a new thing. It is certainly not new in higher education. And for those of you who've been in the field for a while, every year they seem to say mental health is a crisis of concern in higher education, and they have never been wrong, actually. I think these days, certainly post-pandemic, certainly has shifted, to Erin's point, has shifted some of the urgency, some of the issues that cause trouble and struggle for our students. But I would also add, we have always had students, all of you have always had students who've been managing their wellness, who have struggled, who have life happening, who need a measure of flexibility in their lives. And so I think that's also important to remember, is that this is not new, but what we're trying to do is lean in more deliberately, more purposefully, to partner with faculty and other staff and students like student government, RHA friends, to lean into the question and concern and what are the services we have, and how do we all come to the same kind of place in support of our students. Thanks, Erin.
One last thing I guess I want to share, and I meant to do this at the outset. We have talked a lot about student mental health and the importance of supporting our students, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that for many of us, as faculty, staff, instructors, right, we are also trying to manage our own mental health. It has been a couple of very hard years. We've been managing not only our mental health, our family members' mental health, right? And many of us are coming to, this end of the semester with not a whole lot left in our bucket to give, right? At a time where our students need it most. And so I just want to acknowledge that that is something that I don't think has been addressed a lot on campus, is sort of what faculty and staff have gone through. And that, again, our intent here is not to put more on your plate. Our intent right now is to try to provide support, guidance, answer questions. We had discussed, and we sort of had a laundry list of things we wanted to share, but what we ultimately decided or hoped would be more effective was to give you all the chance to share, what are the situations that you're seeing, that you're struggling with, where you could use some guidance. Okay, we're particularly interested in, right, we all sort of have the one-off students that seem to be very extreme cases. For today, what we really want to focus on are the patterns of behavior. So again, what kinds of behaviors are you seeing from your students, where you're seeing it in a significant portion of your students, 10%, 15% of your students, where you're like, I really just need to know the best way to handle this right now. And so we'd love to open it up at this point for people who have specific questions. You're welcome to raise your hand. You're welcome to put your question into chat. If you would prefer for the question to be more anonymous, you're welcome to direct message myself, Gretel, or Troy. But we'd really like to open it up to, what are you guys struggling with? How can we help you right now as you work to support students? Yeah, Sam.
Thanks. I'm going to jump in because I have to go shortly, but I am really struggling with student absenteeism, like never before. Now, obviously, this has been going on, since the pandemic, but it seems to have become an ingrained culture, and I'm not used to it. And I appreciate, Gretel being, that kind but firm and expectations, but it seems to be of no avail, even when I make attendance required. And I say, okay, if you have to miss class, that's fine. If it's a personal crisis, if it's whatever the case, just let me know, just communicate. And even that, which has worked for me in the past, I'm kind of at a loss, because especially when you teach a science course and you have lab sections and students miss one lab, and then it's really hard to make up the work. They can't just figure it out on Canvas. And I'm at maybe Erin, as a scientist and science instructor. I need some tips. I need some pro tips here.
So I wouldn't go so far as saying I have pro tips, and I would, again, open it up. There's plenty of expertise in this room beyond myself, Troy, and Gretel. So again, please, an open invitation for people to share things that are working with them. Again, for me, when it comes to lab, again, I look carefully at the learning objectives, right? Is a makeup lab a virtual lab, something else, right? Is there a reasonable, sorry, let me back up for a second. So again, I think we all know, right, there are reasonable and unreasonable reasons to miss something like a lab, right? And in cases where it's unreasonable, I think it's perfectly fine, and I do this, right, to say, I'm sorry, but that's a 0, right? You missed that opportunity. I can't accommodate a makeup. It is a 0. In cases where flexibility might be warranted, again, I try to look to see, is there another way to reasonably accomplish the same learning outcome? So at least in chemistry, for some of our labs, we have online options or virtual options that, again, I'm confident the student can achieve the same learning outcome, in which case maybe that's a good option. Not all labs are like that. And so I think for me personally, I've tried to build in flexibility that, again, if it is a one-off, right, letting students drop a low lab or 2 low labs, right, that's one thing. Again, providing alternatives where it is reasonable, but having to be firm when it's not. I know some folks in chemistry will try to get, to see if students can come into other lab sections, if that's possible. I think there's options out there, Sam, but I do want to say it's okay to it's okay to have a boundary and say, you've missed these labs, these are 0s. You don't get to make it up.
But that's where the concern comes in, because I would be failing all my students if I did that. This is not just really a lab issue. I actually have better attendance in the lab sections than I do in the lectures, but I increasingly do interactive, I flip the classroom a little bit, and they need to be there in lecture. And this is, of course I do all of those things. Of course they can make it up online. I've had those options since the pandemic, but this is more of a systemic issue. And this is something that not one professor is going to be able to solve. I can wing it. I can figure it out. I've been doing this for years, but this is something that's, it's something about the cohort of students now. And it's about this, I don't know whether it's that because of the pandemic, because of the accommodations we've given them in the past, that there's this, I don't know, they're feeling that perhaps, oh, well, if I just miss once or twice, or I don't know how to overcome that systemic problem and what that solution is.
No, I would say that this is something we absolutely want to take back and think about for next programming next year and support next year for students. And that's a really good point. I would say that the individual work that, as Erin's indicating, is setting a boundary and being clear about what's expected. Then helping students to fail successfully means having that conversation with them as well as we can reach them. I know it's hard to reach a lot of students because they don't check their anything, right? So putting that grade in Canvas, making sure it's there that they can see that 0, right, is important. But also saying, okay, so you could only miss 2 more lectures without failing this class. And just taking that minute to say, hey, you could only miss one more lecture, otherwise you're going to fail because of what we do in the class. I know that doesn't help you look at your broad class them and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail all of these folks, but they're going to have to hear it at some point. If they hear it from enough folks, then I think we're going to start to make some momentum, as well as the work that we are doing in onboarding our students, which we know we have some more focused work to do.
And I would gently add, as the office that gets lots of kinds of reports. And again, I'm going to echo what Erin also said earlier. We realize some of this we are preaching to the choir. So just say that out loud. Any and every navigate alert, not just week 5. There are one-offs. They're like the more our academic advising colleagues know, then the more that we can know here in the Dean of Students office. Those life crises moments, right? We have an online report. We would rather know than not. And yes, we realize we have lots and lots of students, but the more information we have collectively, the more strategic we can be. And then how do we connect with, if it's not just one student has a crisis, but we have a consistent issue across our students, then how do we lean in purposefully in the residence halls if they're first year or second years, from our office directly for the life crisis things, academic advising in partnership with, you name more humans, to address that. Because I think, Samantha, it feels a little like the challenge you're facing is this 2 to 10 year problem. We're going to have to gently, because like I have a kid who's a junior in high school, and she experienced semi-ultimate flexibility for almost 2 years. She's relearning what it means, that executive functioning moment, to no, you really have to do the work and you have to be planful to do that kind of stuff. So, but again, sorry, the bottom line is alerts and navigate, alerts to the Dean of Students office, right? The more we can gather information, the more we can try to be helpful directly.
One other thing I would just share, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sandra McGuire. She's was a chemistry faculty member, but has done a lot of really great work about sort of helping students to learn how to learn. And one of the things that she shared, she did some interviews with students where she again asked them about their high school experience. And I think she was at LSU at the time. So, fairly prestigious, local institution. And the vast majority of her students were telling her that in high school, they could have skipped every single day, shown up the day before the quiz for review day and passed. So again, you're absolutely right, saying those are the expectations. So back to Gretel's point, just hammering to the point where it just seems like you're repeating constantly of that is not how this works. And again, realizing that you can say it, it doesn't mean they will hear it, right? They may need to experience that failure before they can internalize that message. But again, I think it's not just pandemic, it's sort of, again, the way that some of these K-12 exams and other things are constructed. So Kelly, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Sam is saying too, and say that, again, the problem is institutional, not individual. And I think one of the issues we face is, okay, let's say I do draw boundaries and I fail everyone. I'm going to get a lot of crap for that, right? Especially, and again, we're talking about, we're tenured, right? If you're looking at untenured faculty with zero job security, how likely are they to fail their entire class for not attending? It also is difficult when we get different kinds of memos from other sorts of staff places. Like I think there was the memo about, you need to stop asking for medical excuses from students, right? So if students have to miss, you need to stop asking for doctor's notes because it's ableist and so on and so forth, which I understand perfectly, but there's some students maybe I don't know, right? And so should I just not ask for any kind of justification for why they are gone? I mean, I have an absence policy that's very clear, but I feel like they are getting messages elsewhere. And also there's a sort of call the manager, like if I don't like what my professor is saying, I'm going to contact DCA or Dean of Students and get a better answer and get a better response. And depending who they talk to, I have been undermined in terms of the decisions I've made in my classroom. I had a student who went to DCA to help write her email, and they were sort of, again, saying to me that they wanted to see my attendance policy and see how they could help the student navigate my attendance policy. And it was not good for the student to be getting mixed messages that their instructor had less power than a staff member who was not even teaching their class. And I don't know, again, how do we fix some of that? But that was really sort of alarming and egregious to me, the fact that any staff member on campus can undermine my own attendance policy in my own classroom. And then if I do try to set boundaries, the repercussions are going to be, I'm going to get terrible evaluations, right? Which then affects my ability to be retained and promoted. Luckily, again, I'm someone who has tenure, but these are problems that if we aren't talking to one another and we aren't consistent about, hey, actually, when your professor says these are the boundaries and this is your attendance policy, if they go somewhere else and get a different answer, then automatically I have no authority in my classroom. And so I don't know what to do about that, because that seems to be contributing to what I'm seeing as well. And I don't know if others have had the same experiences, but that's been really difficult for me.
Kelly, can I ask a quick follow-up for you? And I didn't see the content, of course, of any of those questions or any of those things. Very often, sorry, 3 seconds of context. Very often students come to the Dean of Students office because either they don't understand, or at least they are representing that they're not feeling heard. And we ask questions of instructional colleagues and other departments. Hey, what's the rule? So we understand, so we can help the student understand. So, I mean, maybe there's not a question there, but so I'm just trying to, you know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out the right space to honor the work of our faculty colleagues who need guidelines, because it'll help students develop executive functioning skills and hopefully learn stuff, which is why they're there. Does that make sense, Kelly?
Yes. And again, like, I trust you personally. I know if my student comes to you, you will not personally undermine me because we have a relationship, right? And I don't know, again, I don't know every staff member on campus. There's a ton of turnover, right? So I don't know, depending on who they talk to, if they're going to get the answer that you just gave, right? And so I don't know what's happening in terms of my students responding negatively or saying that they heard this from this person that actually they don't need to do this, right? And so I just wonder, like, how much authority I actually do have in terms of being able to actually set those boundaries and be firm on those boundaries without sort of repercussions from outside sort of powers that be.
So, you know, I want to add to that, Kelly. I really get that concern and would love to know sort of once we can take offline to like understanding the individual. I also have known a lot of students perhaps misrepresenting what they have heard from staff members in the best possible light for them personally. So there's a little bit of truth seeking in that. I would also like to just pull something apart really quickly from something that Sam said and something that you said, Kelly. If a student has an accommodation related to attendance, the Disability Resource Center will be in contact with you as an instructor to negotiate what that means for that student, and you will be well aware of it. So yes, it is a burden on health services and ABLIS to ask for health notes. Your policy still applies. If a student is sick a bunch of times and is missing your class, refer them to DCA, either through Navigate or just call DCA's office or email and say, hey, can you reach out to this student or Disability Resource Center, excuse me. Thank you, Troy. Refer them to Disability Resource Center, because they may not know that they can get a temporary accommodation if they got a migraine from a sports team or a head injury from a sports team and they aren't getting or just a fall and they aren't getting that help, right? So please know that we will communicate with you if someone has an accommodation, but then we can all use the reasonable human standard within the boundaries of our policy when, you know, someone just has a string of bad freaking luck. But would love to chat a little bit more offline about some of the other issues.
Ken, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I wanted to first say that I ignored the guidance about asking for a medical statement for the case where a student wanted to miss the exam on Thursday and not take it till Monday. But I told him I would take any adult witness of his illness. And so I got an email from his grandmother saying, I really saw that he was sick, and that was good enough for me. So it doesn't really have to put pressure on the health office if you as an instructor are willing to accept the testimony of some other adult that the student really was sick. That was one thing. And the other thing I wanted to ask is to follow up on what Troy said. In the past, we were able to mark students in access point as being, you know, likely to fail or no longer attending. And I think that's ended. Has it been replaced with Navigate? Is there something in Navigate where we're supposed to flag all of the low attending students? I didn't know
So
about this.
we do absolutely have in Navigate an ability to raise an alert when you have an attendance concern about a student, and that's where you can go into Navigate and raise it. We got overwhelming feedback from faculty that they did not want to fill out a concern report on every student with the week 5 report. So we narrowed that to the high DFW and gateway classes that were students, freshmen and sophomore in particular, particularly at risk of failure. So we do have that in Navigate. I am actually in conversations with Todd under the auspices of his work in the registrar's office, how we could send some more frequent attendance surveys that are a little easier to complete than what's in Access Point that we can then take immediate action on. You can put it in Access Point, but it's hard for us to take immediate action on it because we don't get the alerts. So we do want to tighten up that process because we know attendance is one of the first indicators of whether or not a student is going to be successful. So we would love to tighten up that process and make it a lot easier for faculty to raise it reactively as when we send you an email rather than proactively think, oh, I should go into Navigate to let somebody know this student hasn't shown up. So great questions, Ken, but yeah, we do have those abilities.
Stuart?
For what it's worth, I've stopped using Canvas. And that has helped with attendance, I think. At first, it was, I got a lot of pushback from students last semester, but this semester it seems to have shifted the perception that they can't sort of track the class from outside of the class.
Aaron?
As a branch campus faculty member, I need to make my classes as flexible as possible, right? Because I'm teaching not only Wausau students who still are in this pandemic mode, but also broadcast to Marshfield and any main campus student that might want to take the course as well. I've taught empty classrooms, right? Where I recorded a Zoom lecture where not even anyone logged into Zoom, and I'm just recording it and putting it up on Canvas. So what I would like to see, I think, 2 things. One, I'd like to see CITL work with a best practices idea for, oh, you have to do this type of remote or online course development or something along those lines. These are the best practices to reach students that aren't in your face-to-face class, right? What kind of video can you make? Is Zoom on an iPad using Notability or GoodNotes the best way to do that? Or is it a whiteboard lecture in front of a camera? Is it, making little cute animations with dolls? I don't know. Whatever you need to do in order to reach the students. Right now, I mean, when we were thrust in pandemic mode, each and every one of us came up with our own version of the class to try to reach these students. And they can't all be the best way to reach students. So I think especially in computer science, math, and physics, astronomy, these technical courses, there's probably good practices. I just am not well read on what those are. The second thing I wanted to mention is maybe this exists, again, as a branch campus member, I don't know. I would love to see just a 1-page resource guide for faculty members. Is your student suffering from possible mental health issues or stress? Contact these people. Is your student suffering from financial difficulties? They lose their job recently. Here's who you can contact for that. What about accommodations? Here's who you can contact. Are they having trouble in the dorms? Here's who you can contact. Just a very quick guide, because I don't have that information, and the students, I think, would benefit from having faculty and staff have a resource sheet where they know where to send. Oh, there is someone linked something. Okay, so I will take a look at this. Oh, awesome. This is exactly what I wanted. I did not know it existed. So perfect. Thank you so much. So I will definitely print that out. And that's the end of my second issue. Then that's been resolved. Thank you.
2 quick things. Aaron, would it be okay if I followed up with you afterwards to chat more about your first issue and what resources might be most helpful for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. One other thing I want to point out related to your second thing, CITL is working on creating a guide to teaching and learning at UWSP. It's really geared towards new faculty, but it's meant to sort of be a one-stop shop that, again, would have links to the resources like what Troy just shared that exist, but faculty tend not to know about them because again, they live in the student affairs world and you only need them once or twice a year. So we are working on putting that together. We're working with partners across campus to make sure that what we have is the most sort of accurate and up to date. So that will be distributed in fall for all faculty.
What I was thinking, I mean, I would love to see something like CITL develop a studio for faculty, lectures to record, one of those light boards that, you can stand in front of and work with, and have that equipment set up so faculty could just reserve or go in, record a lecture and make it more not only professional looking, rather than having, again, my messy desk behind me in a Zoom lecture, and working with this wonderful, a more consistent presentation of courses as well, online courses across multiple classes that might use similar presentation software.
I just popped a link in the chat for you. We actually do have a Lightboard studio on campus. It's managed by IT, not by CITL, but I just popped a link in there for you, Erin. We're working with IT for CITL to be trained, to be able to train faculty as well, to hopefully make that more available, because not many faculty are aware of it.
And I wasn't. Thank you so much.
Miko?
Hi, yes. So I have a question about how we as faculty are being asked to manage these issues. So I mean, I read the CITL teaching notes and the emails, and I use the referral forms for my students who are struggling. But I think one thing that I'm really curious about is the amount of undue stress and work this puts on faculty members to have to be the point person for this. I guess the thing that I would like to know is what is a reasonable amount of management? And especially as course caps are being asked to be raised, it's getting harder and harder to identify the problems and to also spend a reasonable amount of time managing those issues and passing them forward to someone who is much better equipped to deal with them than myself as the instructor of the classroom. So I guess that's just sort of an issue that I was hoping that we could raise and have a bit of a conversation about.
Miko, just to clarify, are you is there a specific sort of category of issue you're talking about, like mental health? Or are you talking about sort of all, absenteeism and mental health? And
I mean, I think all of it's interrelated, right? And so, I mean, and ultimately I can't ask students who are not showing up. Like, I can't guarantee that they'll tell me why they're not showing up. I know for some of my students, they just decide that I'm not a priority and they don't come to my class. And that's their decision, and they have consequences to that. Sam, you're nodding your head. I literally had an email from a student 2 weeks ago who said, I didn't turn in a midterm. I haven't been submitting any of my papers. I've just been busy with my other classes. Can I have an extension? I'm like, well, thank you for your honesty, but no. I don't know what else to tell you. You decided and you made a decision as an adult that you weren't going to attend your classes. I suggest that you withdraw and consider doing this at a different time. But the students aren't also prepared to hear no. They want us to invest an amount of time into them. And I tell my students at the beginning of the semester, I want you to succeed. It's really important to me. I love what I do. I have my own kids. I can't be a parent for 100 other students to try and get you through your semester, because I'm not equipped to do that. And I can't be a person and a parent if I am managing the mental health issues of 100 other students in a classroom. And that number is pushing 120, 150, and it's getting harder to identify where the problems are and find time in my day to even pass them forward, I guess. I don't know if there's really a question in there, but I know that this is a point of frustration for a lot of faculty members. And all of us, we want to help our students, but I think there's also a certain degree of, we don't have the power to do it anymore because we're running out of steam. So I guess in that way, it's sort of dovetailing with these workplace burnout issues that we're also discussing. And I don't know what a solution is for that, but I guess the question in there is really, how do we proceed here in a way that is mutually beneficial for everyone involved?
Yeah, I'm going to punt that to Troy. Is this a good time to sort of talk about resources? And I mean, first of all, I could not agree more with what you're saying, and I have experienced the exact same thing. And again, the goal here is not, I mean, I think as faculty, we're never going to completely escape that, right? We're often going to be the first point of contact when students are in crisis, so it's not going to stop, right? So I think, again, to your point, which is I think what you're asking, right? How do we make it manageable for faculty? And so I know we've got a variety of new resources that hopefully will be of some assistance. So I'll let Troy talk a little bit about those.
First, thank you for your honesty and transparency. I'm a huge fan for us recognizing the struggle, even if we recognize it together, right? That's an important space to be. So thank you for that. I don't have an answer to maybe the core of your question, which is, right, your workload is going up. The number of students who you are somewhat responsible for in their learning is going up, and you can't see them all, know them all, support them all in the same kind of way if you had a lighter class load overall, right? I don't have an answer for that. I wish I did. I'm sorry that's the challenge. I know we're all managing that in our own unique ways. In terms of the resources, which I think Aaron was pointing to, I will apologize up front and not actually for dropping all the links in all of the chat. Right, if you want access to something, the Dean of Students has a something, can find us something to support you in supporting your students. I'm going to drop this one. This is the university's employee assistance program. If you talk to HR friends, it is the most underutilized resources for faculty and staff on the planet in higher education. And so for humans who need support and care for themselves, A, we already get it, and B, it's anonymous. So if anyone here or you have colleagues who need care, support, resources for their own well-being, that matters a hell of a lot to us, just like the well-being of our students matters a lot to us. So just saying that out loud. The other thing, which is maybe more also where Aaron was going, someone wave at me if this actually opens. So UW system committed $5 million to mental health for UW campuses. It likely, thank you, Gretel, likely will last 3 years. And they paid for 3 new services for students. The item I just dropped the link to, of course, talks about the counseling center at the top of the list, our counseling center, trained and licensed therapists who do amazing and beautiful work. And we just added another therapist mid-year, so our capacity is more reasonable, let's say. They are also happy to consult with faculty and staff. If you are working with a student and you're like, I don't know what's going on here, and you need support in that, our counseling center staff are willing to consult. The 3 items in the middle are the new things. One is, in addition to, if you haven't heard, the National Suicide and Crisis Hotline, right? Text or call 988, that exists. UW system also has a version, which I think is on the left hand of that document. In the middle is an online platform called u.uwsp.edu. It's more about, I don't want to say self-care or self-help, because those are not very helpful terms these days, but it's about how a student can do some skill development when they're in a space of wellness to right before crises, right? How does it fill that blank in many a student's life? And we have added Mantra Health, which is teletherapy available on the weekends, in the evenings, with BIPOC therapists available from across the country. So a few new resources that you can direct serve to your students if it feels right in that space when you're working with a student. Is that where you were going there, Aaron, those 2 items?
Yeah, I think, again, as faculty members, when students come and Troy and Todd and I talked about this a little bit, right? Like our job is to sort of, listen to what they're sharing with us, but then to direct them somewhere else, right? We are not mental health professionals. We cannot act as their counselors, right? Again, this doesn't help with the volume, and I want to acknowledge that, because again, it's often an issue of scale, right? If this were 2 or 3 students, it wouldn't be a big deal, but it's not. It's 40 students, it's 50 students. Again, that is a much bigger issue. But again, I think making sure it's clear that faculty and instructors and staff understand that, again, the goal here is not for any of us to be serving as a mental health professional. It is to listen to the student and to say, here are the resources available, right? And again, CITL has some modules in Canvas that we can import into your courses with information about student supports. Or other things. Again, if you want some help in sort of automating how to get the information into your students' hands, please reach out. We're happy to work with you and put some content into your Canvas courses for you that we've already prepared that, again, you can direct students to. And again, sometimes strategically doing that again at points of the semester where you know it's going to be stressful, right? Around midterm exam time, saying, hey, this is going to be a really stressful time. If you're struggling, here are the resources, right? That little bit of sort of preventative directing, right, can make a big impact for some of those students and sometimes less than the amount of emergent issues that show up in the office. But you're absolutely right. Scale is a huge problem right now, especially with increasing cap sizes.
Can I jump in quickly before you call on Mary?
Yeah.
So also, and again, this also is, I realize, is a challenge of scale. If you as a human are generally uncomfortable with the student across the desk from you breaking down and crying, there are ways to become more comfortable with that. And that is often what a student needs, is to be heard and seen in that very uncomfortable emotional moment, and then connected to resources as well, right? So there's the you're not therapist, and neither am I. None of my staff are actually our therapists. But to be able to sit in that discomfort when the student is being transparent in their struggle with you is also a beautiful developmental supportive space, can be for students. And then call us, call the counseling center, help us connect to the student as well. And we are support you and support them. Thank you.
I'd just like to add real quick, and I want to highlight something that Erin said. Faculty members are not alone in dealing with this. It can feel extremely isolating to be an instructor and to feel like all of your students are falling apart around you and that it's a constant barrage. Like I absolutely get it. And it may not be helpful now, but hopefully it would be helpful in the future, that there is not the expectation that you are solving these issues for students. It's not the expectation that you're creating policies that cause you to bend yourself into a pretzel to support these students, that you are part of a network of humans who are supporting students. And it is absolutely okay for you to say, I'm sorry you're upset. Let me get you to someone who can help. This is what I can do for you in the class, or what I can't do for you in the class, but here's someone for you to talk to about this. Just to know that you're not alone, even though your work as faculty can often be very isolating, I think is something that administratively, I just want to reiterate to everybody here.
Thank you. Mary?
Hi, I want to, basically 2 points. I want to echo a lot of what's already been said about the attendance and just the sea change in attitude toward what the course calendar says. Many more students now are just opting out of coming to class. They just show up when there's an exam, show up to turn the paper. And there's always some who can pull that off, but many can't. And there's a lot of them doing that. I've got one student I have not seen since the second day of class, turning stuff in on campus. I have students tell me they're going to be on vacation next week and expect that to be excused. I've had students want to reschedule an exam because the family's taking a trip. And they think that's okay. So there's just this whole attitude of what this calendar means. And I want to echo the comment that this can't be instructors deal with that in their individual courses. We've got to get everybody on board, residence life, folks who deal with them in orientation. We've got to be driving this message that is not how it works. You can't just leave it to us to draw the boundary. And sort of a related issue that is driving me batty this semester is I can't get students to bring books to class. And I teach a course called Reading and Writing. We're looking at what is this writer, how do they introduce? How do they use examples? You've got to be looking at the text. And I told them flat out, if you don't have your books, you can't do hands-on work. I can't put you in groups looking at this question. It's got to be me up front talking at you, which is not as good for you. Still, I don't even have enough books that they can share one for 4 students. Pulling my hair out. I even had a student last semester attempt to write a paper that required them to use readings in the textbook as sources, and he doesn't have the book. He thought he could pull that off. I don't know what to make of that. And I don't know where that comes from, if that's somehow a pandemic reflex, or they're so used to things being online that a physical book they can't wrap their heads around. But I'm trying to teach reading and writing skills, and there are students who literally do not have possession of the book. I don't know what to do with that. So any ideas I welcome.
So I will share, none of my children, and my oldest is only 12, so I want to acknowledge, like, they're not high school. None of my children have ever brought a textbook home, ever. So, I mean, I don't think it's an overstep to say that the vast majority of our students do not actually know what to do with a textbook or how to use a textbook. And I don't say that to like excuse this, especially the trying to write a paper without having the book. I'm not trying to excuse that. But again, I think it's important to understand that for many of our students, I don't even want to say it's an entitlement. They have never known anything different, right? They have never known a universe where they have had to bring a book to class. And so again, the amount of hand-holding, I hate to use that term, but again, it feels like so much higher. And I see this with some of my students in terms of, again, where they need to bring physical things to class and they don't want to do it. So I completely understand what you're saying. And to be honest, aside from, what you're doing and saying, listen, if you don't bring your textbook, you can't do this or you can't do that. And again, holding that boundary, personally, I think what you are doing is the right thing. And I don't know what else you can do. I do think this, like many things, and again, sort of to your first point, Mary, many of these things are not going to be fixed by individual instructors, right? It's not enough for you to hold the line on this. And so again, one of the things we've been trying to talk to is trying to encourage, even if you can get at the department level to have consistent policies and stick to them, right? It gives individual instructors a little bit more power, right? To be able to say, no, our policy is that if you don't bring the textbook, I ask you to leave, or, whatever that policy looks like. Maybe that's not a great example, right? But again, trying to establish those departmental norms, and to your point, and I saw both Gretel and Troy nodding, right? Like working this into welcome week activities, working this into orientation, and having that very consistent messaging to students, again, about what are the expectations, how do you be a college student? And so I don't know if Troy or Gretel, if you have anything that you want to add to that.
So I know and orientation and welcome week have come up, or orientation has come up a couple of times. We're actually having conversations right now about how to make welcome week more of an onboarding experience, because first orientation is all the way back in June. The focus of orientation has shifted and it's condensed quite a bit. And so there's less time to cover things like exactly what you're stating in expectations. And I see Ken has made some comments in the chat as well. But welcome week, I think, really is our next opportunity to rethink that structure, and that being more of an onboarding experience on expectations for students. I'm sitting down with Justin Willis and team in admissions to really align the outcomes of those two major cornerstone events in a student's onboarding to the university. So will it fix all problems? Absolutely not. Is attendance required? Yes, it's required, but students don't always, we don't take attendance there either. So we are trying to find an 80% solution in this case. So we are actively working on that in terms of a student's onboarding. And then we also want to make sure that we reinforce that through conversations with students in other contexts, whether it be with our residence hall friends or whether it be with other colleagues in academic and student affairs.
Yeah, Kelly.
Sorry, I feel like if anyone else wants to jump in, I don't want to take over. But I do feel like I want to be clear too, I didn't join this group just to crap on all students, right? Because I think what I'm seeing too is that there's a chasm between the students who get it and know how to adult and know how to college and those who don't. Because I do have students who know how to bring books to class, who know the attendance policy, and who completely are functional. Sophomores, juniors, seniors, again, this is not pandemic. And so what is it that is causing this just, I don't have any middle ground students anymore. I have students who know how to contact their advisor and how to email and how to do college well. They're also first generation. They also didn't have parents, again, so like that's not the issue either. And so I'm just trying to figure out, why is it that there is a subsection of students who is completely unwilling or unable? I mean, I have a student an advisee of mine, who needs to drop a course like today. He wants to drop this late in the semester. There's 2 weeks left. And I believe there is an appeal process. If he wanted to do that, he could. And so again, like institutionally, we are allowing for so much flexibility. And again, this was happening, during pandemic as well, that I don't know that there are some students who realize that there are any consequences, because in many cases, they don't have to face consequences. If they drop 2 weeks before the end of the semester, they can appeal, come back in, take the course, whatever it may be. It sounds like, they're not aware that in many cases, having a full load and failing all their courses, they may have to pay tuition back. Like that memo was not coming across. And so I wish institutionally, I know I don't have much time left, there was a way for all of these groups to have like a regular conversations. I feel like a lot of what's happening now is that we're all trying to do this piecemeal in terms of helping students. And we're not actually, I would love there to be like a governance committee comprised of Dean of Students Office and Gretel and academic advising and faculty, and maybe that's academic affairs, I don't know, or a task force or something that like there's some group on campus that, and I know there's the retention task force too, and I know that exists. I know that's a thing. And so I don't want to, reinvent the wheel, because I feel like there's a lot of reinventing the wheel on this campus too. But if there's some way for all of us to be consistently speaking together on just these issues of student success, whether that be maybe adding additional people to the retention task force, but also I think one of the things that Aaron brought up too, like how does someone who isn't starting on campus know where all of these things are, right? Where is the training for instructors who've maybe been here for a while on the different resources? Troy, you shared some, I feel like I'm really checked in, and you shared some resources I'd never heard of, right? I've been here for a while and I feel like I pay attention to things, right? And so if I don't even know that some of those new counseling sources existed, how is someone who, again, doesn't have the time that I have to like be on this stuff, right? And is like searching out student service. So I know that's a lot, but institutionally, again, what can we do in terms of making sure that we're not just having individual sort of Zoom meetings to address these problems as they arise, but that there is some kind of consistent sort of faction, and that they're reporting out to the rest of the campus so everyone else knows, yes, this is being tackled by a certain group. Yes, we're doing this. Here are the new things. I mean, I know message of the day and the communication is abysmal on campus in terms of reaching to people. And so I know that's difficult as well, but I would love to know how to be part of that, or again, how to highlight those efforts that are ongoing in terms of the things that are changing, because support services changes almost every semester in terms of what's out there and what resources are available. I look at DRC right now, and the amount of things that my students can get through the Disability Resource Center is so much more than even a year ago, right? But again, like I find that because I search for it, and I know that not all of us have the time to do that. And so how do we better communicate what we have and what we're doing to address this?
To be fair, Kelly, those mental health resources are new. So the big launch is for this coming fall. It's out there, but it's new. So you're good, my friend.
If I can just briefly, I want to get to Cindy's question in the chat about incompletes, because I think that's a really, really important one as well. So yes, you're right, Kelly. We are having a lot of conversations about it, and communication here is one of the things that we are consistently challenged on in order how to get messages to people who want to hear them in the timely fashion where they need them. I will share that Retention Steering Committee has been working on many of these issues, and we've been working internally to my college about how we communicate more effectively about all of those. We're also developing a retention framework with folks in academic and student affairs so that we can clearly communicate where the focus of folks should be, where the lane is, where what is working in terms of retaining and supporting students, and what areas can kind of fall away, right, in areas where we may be spending some time. So I think there'll be some more guidance coming in the future, and certainly as I'll talk to Andy Cinnamon, who chairs that committee, about additional faculty representation to make sure that those communication loops are closed. So yes, and thank you so much for wanting that to happen, because I love your passion about it, Kelly. It's one of my favorite things about you. So I do want to very briefly address what Cindy raised about incompletes in the chat. So we have noticed a pattern in incompletes where students aren't actually completing them, right? So an instructor will offer it, and then, as we all know, it's hard to follow up on those things because of all the things that happen, and it's basically another student in another class that you have to manage. And I'm not saying that that's a faculty issue. This is the student has to take responsibility for this information that they haven't done. From a policy perspective, I believe we recommend that there's a certain percentage of the course that's completed before we even offer the incomplete. So, but that I believe is, if you will, incomplete guidance on how to use them. I think it is it reasonable to assume that the student is going to complete the information within a specific time frame, and is the faculty member able to provide the guidance necessary and the structure necessary for that student to complete? I think academic affairs should probably look at that policy a little more closely to put a few more guide rails around it, because we don't advise incompletes, especially for margin cases. So if a student's done 50% of the class, we're not so thrilled about incompletes that might fall within that category. 80%, that's where we're talking a little more reasonable. You know, a paper and 2 exams is a lot easier than literally half the class. And so while it's been great that instructors have offered that option to students who are facing extraordinary circumstances, or who are facing a circumstance where they really are motivated to complete, I think it's also something we are really encouraging caution about, especially in the follow through. And it would be helpful, especially for a student in the first 3 semesters, if there's something that gets into a note to the advisor through Navigate, or some notification to the advisor that that's going on. So it can be a topic of inquiry, at least with students, if not a little bit of follow-up. So I would certainly be cautious in that area, Cindy, as you advise folks. Let's make sure that we're creating an environment where a student can be successful, knowing that the student has to take the lion's share of the initiative to make that happen.
I want to follow up briefly, just because I specifically asked Todd in anticipation of questions about incomplete. So again, the official language in the policy is that they should be reserved for the completion of a definable amount of work. So again, an exam, a paper, an exam, right? Again, not an extensive amount of the course. Instructors should document what students must do and inform students of the deadline, and department chairs should be copied on that. So the default policy is that if nothing is done at the end of the following semester, it will default to an F. Okay. But as an instructor, you can say, I'm going to give you until June 30th to do this. Or if you're not, not on contract and not going to work over summer, that's fine too. You can say you have until September 30th to finish this. You need to inform the student in writing. You should copy your department chair. If that deadline is missed, you absolutely at that point can give the student a 0 for that missed work. And submit whatever their grade would be. But again, Todd also urged, if you have students who are in the cases where, again, they have missed 10 weeks, perhaps a late withdrawal is a much better request than asking for an incomplete. So, oh, go ahead, Gretel.
I was going to say, I will note that we have facilitated several late withdrawals and even facilitated in extraordinary life circumstances clear drops after the deadline if there's a student who had a major issue, right? So we would rather not do an incomplete in that case and help the student support their academic record rather than have the student have that pressure to do work and then have an F on their transcript.
I want to be mindful of time. I know Troy had one comment he wanted to share in closing, and then I have one quick one as well.
Okay, now it's 1.5. So first, thank you, everyone. It's amazing. Thank you for being here. This time of year, well, throughout any time of the year, faculty instructional colleagues might get a note from the Dean of Students office or one of my staff that says something like, the student is experiencing major life issue. The student is included on this email. We're asking for, as you are able to for some flexibility and support for your respective class. right? It's your class. We're letting you know there's a big thing happening, and we're cluing you in because the student might not want to share that, whatever that is, with you. So just know that is why we're reaching out. This time of the year, some of those might say, hey, if an incomplete is appropriate, the student is interested. And then we give it to the student to then visit with their faculty about what that definable piece of work is. So if all of you or your colleagues are seeing notes from us, just know we're supporting you by supporting the students as the messenger in some way for some of those things. All right, that's my piece. Thanks, Erin.
Just in closing, I want to echo, thank you guys so much for all showing up. This was a really wonderful conversation. We will be posting the recording. I also do have, and I hesitate to say this, but I do have a follow-up survey. I know everyone is surveyed out. I know everybody's sick of data requests, not just me, but all of us who have been involved in these conversations are really committed to trying to provide support next year to faculty, and we can't do that if we don't understand what support you all need, right? I've had lots of conversations with people. I think I've got some good ideas, but we really want that faculty voice in, so that as we're planning our professional development over summer for next academic year, that we're providing it in the areas that are most going to impact faculty and instructors who are dealing with students. So I will post that. Yes, as Troy said, we were taking notes. I was frantically scribbling as well, but we will post all of that. Please, if you have time, take a second to do that. Please direct. Colleagues will send out stuff in the mod and other stuff. I'll post all the resources that we shared in the chat on the CITL webpage. We'll send all of that out. But thank you guys so much for your time and for all that you do for students. Again, this institution would not run without you, and we do see you, and we want to support you. So thank you so much. Good luck with the end of the semester. Let us know how we can help.